Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here.
Really, because
Yeah.
there are two surprises here. I mean, it's incredible to have you here, as has just been said. Let me introduce you first. For the people who don't know you, but I'm sure everybody knows you. Renowned philosopher, currently distinguished service professor at of law and ethics at the University of Chicago, where you live. You live at the lake. You run there. You like to run. You're super fit. That's what everybody can see immediately. How often do you run and sport?
Well, I do something every day except one day off. So, but I do weight training also, and yeah.
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 And you're very specific, because I heard when you said, "I'll come to Amsterdam. I want to run, but not in the Vondelpark, because it's not good for me."
Yeah, well, at my age, hard surfaces are not my friend.
Oh.
I like a nice dirt trail or something like
Yep.
that. Yeah, and that's what we've, of course, in other parts of the Netherlands, you have that.
We have.
Lots of that.
Mahler. Let's talk about
Mahler,
Mahler.
yeah.
Why is he important in your life?
Well, as I told you, I didn't really get to know the music of Mahler until rather late in life. It was actually in my early 20s, because I had been a passionate opera fan since I was about 10. I went to my first opera at the age of 6, Rigoletto, and I was so entranced and enacting it with my dolls that I became an opera fan. But Mahler's music I was introduced to by the family I married into, who, because in America Mahler was not being played at that time. It was when Leonard Bernstein made his famous recordings of Mahler, and he really put Mahler on the map. So it was at this time that I met Mahler, but boy, the impact of the emotional insight and the ability to create what I think is not entirely unique, but is certainly his own, namely a symphony that has a narrative structure that's in some way about human striving and the various forms it takes and the obstacles it encounters. And often there is therefore a text in one movement or another, but at the same time it is symphonic. And Mahler once said, what symphony means to me is creating a world with all the resources at my disposal. And I think that's what he did, sort of better than anyone else. I don't know whether it makes sense to say that, but to me, anyway.
Yeah. He had a miserable life, or miserable. There was a lot of drama in his life.
Yeah. Well, of course, human life is really always sort of pockmarked by loss. And, we always have encountered deaths of people we love. But I guess in this era, it's easy to forget about that for a while. You kind of don't see it as much around you, the deaths of children particularly. So people kind of forget that terrible, terrible grief. And he, of course, knew the deaths of his siblings, but when he picked up Ruckert's poems about the deaths of children, of course, Ruckert had known the deaths of his children from scarlet fever, but Mahler had not yet encountered the deaths of his children. Alma said, "This is a bad omen, don't do it," right? And then, of course, one of his children did shortly thereafter die of scarlet fever. So, yeah, but human life is that. It's the chance you take in being human, I want to say. Because when you don't want to take the risk, then you retreat. And some philosophers, the Stoics, thought, well, you shouldn't really be human. You should just step back, be detached, and then you can live like a god. If you don't care for children, you don't care for your loved ones, you don't even care for a spouse, then you can be either like a king, sometimes they said, or like a god. But if you take the chance to be human, then you will encounter deep pain. And Mahler, like no one else, could give form to that pain. He once wrote, "A burning pain crystallizes." And this is, I think, what music can do that other arts perhaps can't do as profoundly, is to take the shape of that pain, which of course affects the whole organism. And music, being the most bodily and kinetic of the arts, well, dance as well, of course, is, can give more than literature, I think, form and crystallization to that pain that's involved, and not only pain, but also the joy that's involved in the risk to be human. And what I think we find with Mahler is that again and again, it's worth the risk.
You and I just went upstairs here to the kleine zaal, and we saw kids listening to a music show.
I think it's so amazing what you're doing with kids here. I think it's great. I have to say that you're beyond the two things I know about in my city, the opera and the symphony, in the sense that they both do performances for kids, but getting kids that young so deeply involved is not done by the arts organizations. We do have the Chicago Children's Choir, but that's privately funded. It's a separate organization. And no, I think it's so important to get kids when they're very young, very personally and physically involved in making music. And I thought it was wonderful.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not having fun, you're just not going to do it. And music is fun. And so that's the lesson that you have to learn very early, I think.
So it's a very powerful tool. If you use it in a bad way, music has an enormous impact on
But that's why it's so important not to neglect it for people who want democracy and inclusiveness and compassion. I mean, for them, above all, we should be supporting the education of children in an inclusive form of music making.
It almost sounds like you are describing, for example, this building as a beacon of democracy. Then.
I think I am, absolutely. Because after all, Mahler's art centrally is about inclusion and compassion for everyone. Fear is very dangerous because it can cause two things. First of all, it leads you to bully other people. You keep them down by striking at them. But it can also, and this is what I think happens with Trump, it leads people to run into the arms of some powerful authoritarian figure who can protect them. And in that way, it's really a dangerous enemy of democracy. Democracy requires trust, and trust requires putting fear on hold. So that's the thing that I was so worried about with the election of Trump.
Martha Nussbaum. Thank you.